Hey everybody, Mr. Smith here. In this video, we are going to continue talking about voting theory. Particularly, we're going to talk about something called the Condorcet Criterion. Right there, Condorcet, that's how you say that, not Condorcet or Condorcet, it's the Condorcet Criterion. This is another one of our fairness criteria. Okay, this is a fairness criteria. In the last video, we looked at the majority criterion. This is another fairness criteria. Remember, the big thing with that is that this is going to tell us whether or not an election is fair. This does not determine a winner, so it's an important distinction. The Condorcet criterion is not a method of determining a winner or a method of holding an election. Rather, it's a method of determining whether or not the results of an election are fair. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about in this video. We're going to use this example to help us. So this is a modified problem from one of the problems in your textbooks. It's about Cam the Ram. So let's say in a alternative universe, the CSU football team is actually good, and Cam the Ram has invitations to go perform for fans at five different college bowl games. Okay, so he's got invitations from the Rose Bowl, the Hula Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, the Orange Bowl, and the Sugar Bowl. And we want to know where Cam the Ram is going to go. So let's say 100 CSU students are selected to vote and decide which bowl game Cam should go do the halftime show at. All right, because for some reason they want Cam the Ram to come do the halftime show at their bowl game. The ballots have all been collected, the students have voted, and this is what we end up with. So this is the preference schedule for the election. If you remember how to read this, this means that 49 students voted like this. So 49 students said their first choice is the Rose Bowl, their second choice is the Hula Bowl, their third choice is the Fiesta Bowl, their fourth choice is the Orange Bowl, their fifth choice is the Sugar Bowl. So that's kind of how you read this thing. 48 students voted in this way, and 3 students, a smaller number, voted in this way. Okay, so let's ask some questions about this. Under the plurality method, I want to know which bowl is declared the winner. So remember, plurality just means most first place votes. That's all you need to win under plurality. That's what our last video was about. So I'm going to give you a chance to go back and look at the preference schedule. I want you to see under plurality which bowl would win. Let's say we're going to determine the winner by plurality. Who's going to win? All they need is the most first place votes. So here's preference schedule again. Who do you think is going to win this election underneath the plurality method? Well, it turns out all I got to do is look at the first choice votes, and I see clearly that the Rose Bowl has the most first choice votes with 49, just one more than the Hula Bowl. So under plurality, the Rose Bowl is the winner of this election because they have the most first place votes. But now the question I want to ask is right here. Why might this be a bad outcome? Why might this not be the best possible outcome? Maybe there'll be some people that are upset about this. So let's go back and look at the preference schedule again. If the Rose Bowl wins, why is that not the best outcome? Take a look particularly not at the first place votes, but the rest of the options and think, why might it be a bad thing or a poor outcome if the Rose Bowl wins? The answer is clearly seen right here, in that the Rose Bowl has the most last place votes. They actually have 51 last place votes, which is over half the voters. So Rose Bowl has the most last place votes, 51 to be exact. Okay, so they've got a lot of last place votes. There's a lot of people that really don't want the Rose Bowl, so this might be a bad outcome. Okay, we actually looked at this in the last video to see how plurality isn't always really that fair, because a candidate with lots of last place votes can end up winning the election. So now I want you to think about this. Look more closely at the preference schedule and just examine it, look at the votes, and think using common sense, who do you think should win? Just throw rules out the window and just think, who do you think should win? Take a look at the preference schedule. Just by nature of how the votes are cast, which bowl do you think should win? Which one does it seem like would be most fair to win? I would imagine that lots of us would say the Hula Bowl, because if you notice, the Hula Bowl only has first and second place votes. They were only one vote away or two votes away from winning under plurality. They also have the most second place votes, more than anybody else. So maybe the Hula Bowl is a better winner for this election. We think the we think that the Hula Bowl may be a more fair winner, because they have 48 first place votes, which again was only one away from tying the Rose Bowl. And they also have 52 second place votes, which is a lot. More than half of the voters. 52 second place votes. So maybe the Hula Bowl is a fair winner. Okay, so let's make an argument, a more persuasive, more official argument about why the Hula Bowl should be the winner. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to compare the Hula Bowl in a head-to-head matchup with all the other bowls. Okay, so we're going to look at Hula versus the Rose Bowl. We're going to do Hula versus Fiesta, Hula versus Sugar, and Hula versus the Orange Bowl. Okay, so we're going to look at the Hula Bowl versus all the other bowls individually. So let's go back to the preference schedule to look at this real quick. We're going to do Hula versus Rose Bowl first. So let me show you how you can do this on the preference schedule. All right, so I'm looking at the preference schedule, and I'm going to compare the Hula Bowl to the Rose Bowl in a head-to-head matchup and see what happens. Okay, so when I do this, I have to ignore all of the other bowls except for Hula and Rose. So I'm just going to cross out the bowls that I don't care about right now. I only care about Hula and Rose, so I don't care about Fiesta, Orange and Sugar, Fiesta, Orange and Sugar, Fiesta, Orange and Sugar. I'm just looking at Hula and Rose. And now I'm going to see between the two who has the most votes over the other. Okay, so Rose has 49. Hula gets 48 here. Hula gets these three. They bump up because I don't care about whoever was here. I think it was Fiesta. All I care about is Hula and Rose. So Rose has 49. Hula has 51. So it is 49 to 51 in favor of the Hula Bowl. 49. So Hula wins that matchup. So in a head-to-head matchup, Rose Bowl won by plurality, but in a head-to-head matchup, Hula Bowl beats them. Let's think about Hula and Fiesta now. Okay, so let's go back down to our preference schedule. Hula versus Fiesta. I'm gonna have to erase here real quick. Bear with me. Okay, so we've got our preference schedule all cleaned up. Now we're doing Hula versus Fiesta. So again, I'm gonna ignore all the bowls that aren't Hula and Fiesta. Ignore everything that is not F or H. And now I see who has the most votes over the other one. So I got 49 for Hula, 48 for Hula, and 3 for the Fiesta. Okay, so that's 97 for Hula and 3 for Fiesta. So let's 97 for Hula, 3 for Fiesta. If I can get back there. 97 for Hula, 3 for Fiesta. Hula obviously wins that matchup. Let's do Hula versus Sugar then. So I'm going to ignore everything that's not H and S. Okay. So H has 49, H has 48, H has 3. It turns out that Hula has all of the votes in that case. So that's 100 to 0 for the Hula Bowl. So that's a clean sweep. 100 to 0 for Hula. Then for sake of time, if you do Hula versus Orange, Hula wins again 100 to 0. So it turns out that Hula wins each of these head-to-head matchups, okay? So this tells us something, this gives us an example of what a Condorcet candidate is, example of the Condorcet criterion. Condorcet candidate is a candidate that beats every other candidate in a head-to-head matchup. A candidate that beats every other candidate in a head-to-head matchup. So if I match them up head-to-head and see who has the most votes over the other, if there's a candidate that wins every single head-to-head matchup, they're what we call a Condorcet candidate. Okay, so now here's what the Condorcet criterion tells us. If there is a Condorcet candidate, the Condorcet criterion says that candidate should win the election. It would seem fair if that candidate won the election. If you have a candidate that beats every other one in a head-to-head matchup, it would seem fair for that candidate to win the election. This is just an example of the Condorcet criterion. Okay, so remember, this is not a determination. This is not a way to determine the winner of the election. This is just simply a way to determine whether or not it's fair. So the Condorcet criterion helps us to determine, does the election seem fair? Okay, if the Condorcet candidate does not win, then maybe it's not fair. This would be an example of this bowl game vote. The Rose Bowl won this election under plurality, but the Hula Bowl was a Condorcet candidate because they beat every other candidate in a head-to-head matchup, but they don't win. So maybe we feel like that's not really the best outcome. Maybe it would make a little bit more sense for the Hula Bowl to win. Okay, so that's just a brief example of what the Condorcet criterion tells us. All right. As we move forward, we'll look at a couple more voting methods. Remember, the Condorcet criterion does not determine the winner of an election. It just determines whether or not the election seems fair. Okay? Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.